Hello, welcome to Revenant Reads. I'm Vin, and today for Book Trek 2022, we're talking about Relics by Michael Jan Friedman. So Book Trek is an annual event now, in which I and some other great people are celebrating Star Trek fiction. Last year was a 5-month event. This year it's 2 months. So August was focusing on the iterations of Star Trek that were kind of, I guess, closer to Roddenberry's vision, the stuff that we looked at last year. And that would be everything from the original series all the way up through Enterprise. And then September is Strange New Worlds, looking at things that either came after Enterprise, so that could be the Kelvin timeline, or it could be Kurtzman Trek, or it can just be book series that don't have a direct on-screen presence, that are book-only series. So this book I had read right at the end of August. My previous video, where I give an update, explains why I haven't been making videos on the last few weeks. So this is late coming, and I apologize for all those Book Trek people out there. This is just first times I've actually gotten to really film and actually coherently speak for any length of time. So, any fan of The Next Generation, I think is going to instantly recognize what this is and what is on this cover. So this is a novelization of an episode. The story and teleplay was by Ron Moore, and then the novelization is Michael Jan Friedman, who often gets some pretty good stuff. I consider him a solid Trek writer. He often has really good ideas. Sometimes I think they're executed to more success than other times. I had recommended earlier in Book Trek his book Kalis to Steve Donahue, and I think Steve Donahue, overall liked that book, and I agree with him. It probably could have been even better than it was, but still, it showed Friedman does have some good ideas. He does. There's other books that he's written that I'm a little more lukewarm about, but this episode here is one of my favorites from the Next Gen. So, you of course had the original series in the late 1960s, and then the films started coming out, throughout the 80s especially. And throughout Next Generation, they often didn't give us too much of an indication or too much of a clue of what was going on with, or what happened to the original series crew. We saw little glimpses, and every time they did show us, I think that to Next Generation's credit, and you can argue differently maybe when it comes to the movie Generations, and Captain Kirk, but throughout the run of the show, the 7 seasons, I think whenever they did address or show people from the original series, they did so with a good amount of grace and dignity. I think they usually handled it very well. In the pilot episode, Encounter at Farpoint, we see a very, very elderly Admiral McCoy who's touring the ship. It's a very short cameo, but it's great to see him. Later on, we do see Spock, who we see is still alive and well, and who is an ambassador and who is working for the unification of Vulcan and Romulus. And that's great. We even see his father, Sarek, come in, which is, I think, a really good episode, actually, when Sarek comes in and has to do a mind meld with Captain Picard. And, of course, here we end up seeing what happens to Scotty. And I remember, I've always loved the episode. I've always thought that they did Scotty well. It's a touching episode. Essentially, they find a really amazing piece of kind of sci-fi technology, a Dyson sphere, a structure, a sphere that has been built around a star. Just at like the kind of Goldilocks distance where on the surface of the inside of this sphere, you can just have, life all throughout there. Just not on one planet orbiting, just this entire interior of the sphere. And they find a Dyson sphere, and they find a crashed shuttlecraft or a ship on there. And they find that inside this ship, basically the transporter is running a pattern buffer It's been jury-rigged to do this. And when they finally let it go through and the transporter comes through, it's Scotty. He's basically survived for like 70-something years, I think, in this pattern buffer. And so we now have this kind of cool concept of the Dyson sphere going on, but also we have Scotty seeing the Enterprise D and interacting with the crew. And what we get with that is some really nice moments, really great contemplation of, you know, when the world moves on without you. Scotty was the miracle worker, right? He was the best engineer of his generation, and he finds that technology, a lot of it has moved on. That people who would have fawned over his presence in his day barely know who he is now. You know, maybe they recognize a little bit, excuse me, from the history books, but for the most part, you know, he feels obsolete. And I always thought that the episode handled that stuff really tactfully, in a really touching way. And Michael Jan Friedman, I think, he doesn't deviate too much from the script. All that great stuff from the script is there. It's intact. He adds a few pretty good things. The first thing is the first 30 pages or so are really kind of a prologue where it's showing us how Scotty ended up on the Dyson sphere. So we see him, you know, in the past, in that situation, and that was fine. There's another really nice one. There's a great moment in the episode where Scotty goes to the holodeck and he has the computer recreate the bridge of the original Enterprise, and he's just there reminiscing, you know, and he's sad, he's depressed. What they couldn't do in that episode is what Friedman does. Is in this he calls the computer to actually recreate the crew as they were in the original series, and it's basically he's reliving one of his favorite moments. And it's just, it's really, you know, it's touching. I don't know if it's just because, you know, if somebody who's not a Trek geek will find it as touching. But somebody who loves both the original series and Next Gen, and seeing that kind of scene play out, it's only a few pages, but it's enough. You feel the nostalgia, you feel the love that Scotty had for his crew, and therefore why we also end up loving that crew as well. And that's, you know, there's little deviations here, little additions in here that make this more than just, you know, reliving an episode. So even if, you know, if you like this episode, especially, or even if you've never seen it, I would highly recommend this one. I know Friedman, he talks about in the introduction how he wrote this at breakneck speed. I think he only had like a month to write it, to put it through. And of course, you know, it's an adaptation, so a lot of the script was right there with him. But I think he does a really good job. You know, it's very well done. I've read some novelizations, and some of them are not so successful. This one is. So I actually really like this one. So like I said, I read this kind of at the end of August, and I might have finished it right at the very beginning of September. I'm not entirely sure. It's that whole time period is kind of a blur for me right now. So this is a belated book trek video from the first month, and once again, Relics from Star Trek Next Generation. If you've read it, love to hear your thoughts on this, and as always, thank you, booktube.